Domestic violence is the oldest and most pervasive form of violence in the world, says author, essayist, and activist Angela Davis. It's long been accepted as just an inevitable part of the complex fabric of family relationships across all cultures, including mainstream American culture. Today, a growing movement to break that mindset is emerging, even as data reveal that the rate of domestic violence has not fallen. 1 out of 3 women and 1 in 6 men in the U.S. have experienced domestic violence at some point in their lifetimes. The most dramatic indicator of progress, however, says Davis, is that when she was growing up, there was silence about this issue based on the assumption that nothing could be done. 50 years later, there's a public commitment to end domestic or gender-based violence for good. That, she suggests, represents a sea change. Speakers today will focus on efforts to find solutions through legislation, reforms in the judicial system, and grassroots mobilizing through social media by survivors of abuse themselves. I'm Sunita Surabji, EMS's health editor.
There you just listened to the opening remarks at the media roundtable put together by Ethnic Media Services, wherein the top points centered on domestic violence. Purpose of the roundtable with the journalist is to address issues of the tireless war against the monster and also share the wins from the age-long battle by individual fighters and family organizations pushing back on the presence of violence in family relationships. Sunita Surabji, the health editor at Ethnic Media Services, still on the microphone, introduces the resource persons at the press conference.
Our speakers include Angela Davis, who is a distinguished professor emeritus at UC Santa Cruz. She's an author and, of course, a veteran activist. California State Senator Susan Rubio, a Democrat from Baldwin Park. Tina Swithin, the founder of One Woman's Battle. And V.G. Sundaram, a reporter for the San Francisco Public Press, and the co-founder of Narika, a nonprofit advocacy group working with South Asian American women.
First of the guest resource persons to grab the microphone is Professor Angela Davis. She made comparison of what struggles against domestic violence used to be and what they are in the present, with more awareness by the public, the use of technology, and more related. Even though it is clearly a work in progress, Angela remarks that the battle is being lost steadily by perpetrators, with brighter hope for more wins through the advocates fighting for victims at all levels.
This is the most widespread pandemic form of violence in the world. And with all of the actions that have happened, with all of the, domestic violence centers and crisis centers and so forth, the actual incidence of violence has not changed very much. When I think back to my own childhood and the lack of a capacity to understand that, something needed to be done and something could be done. I mean, I'm, very fortunate in my family, immediate family. We did not have direct experiences, but I can remember many stories, friends and relatives absolutely incapable of doing anything because the available discourse was that this was just a natural phenomenon. This was just something that existed and nothing could really be done about it except to find solutions involving escape, but not changing the frame, not challenging whether violence was necessarily a part of human relationships. And when I compare that period to today, we have made a progress that would have been unimaginable. That I don't know whether I've ever experienced a moment when vast numbers of people were so politically engaged, when vast numbers of people were so concerned about the future of our planet, concerned about the climate, concerned about war, concerned about ending racism. That's very different from this is a period unlike any other in the history of this country. We're making progress. I feel very hopeful.
A Californian lawmaker, Senator Susan Rubio, takes turn to address media practitioners present at the Ethnic Media Services organized press conference. As a record victim and survivor of domestic violence herself, Susan Rubio shared her experiences plus her lawmaking works as senator towards using the legal tools to end domestic violence and adequately protect both the primary and secondary victims of the condemnable act of violence in families. She speaks more.
Anyone that knows my work knows that I focus a great deal of my time and energy and policies on domestic violence issues, in particular because I'm a survivor of domestic violence. And since I started in 2018, I've made it my mission one step at a time. One of the bills that I did help pass was SB 914, which is the HELP Act. And that bill was primarily focused on tackling domestic violence victims that end up on the streets because of their circumstance. But often they're overlooked. They're not given the resources that they need. And so when we think of a victim with children, they're having to make a choice whether they leave the relationship and end up on the street homeless with their children, or stay in that relationship and be abused and battered. So that wasn't a real choice. And many victims, some that I spoke with, share that they understand that when they go to shelters, they only allow them to stay 30 to 45 days, and then they're out on the street again. So for them, thinking long term, they really have to take it in and say, do I want to be homeless or do I want to stay in this abusive relationship? There is no middle ground or a solution. So with the HELP Act, now we are requiring that we call them unaccompanied women. These are women who leave a relationship and end up on the street, but they don't get priority. Some reported up to being on the street up to 10 years before they got help. And that is just unacceptable. Now, any continuum of care that receives state funding is required to have a gender equity lens, if you will. We want them to specifically be able to create policy and gather data that really focuses on domestic violence victims and this vulnerable population, and have clear outline goals. We want to see goals set and be measured and tracked to make sure that we're being successful with this policy. Another bill that I'm focusing right now, in 2019 when I started, I passed the Phoenix Act, which extended the statute of limitations for victims of domestic violence. It had not been touched in 30 years. So victims have 3 years to come forward and seek justice or get help. And many victims go up to 8, 9, 10 years with post-traumatic stress. They're not able to help themselves because of the trauma that they endured. And for the state to mandate that they come forward in 3 years was unacceptable. So I set out to change that and make it 15 years. Unfortunately, they reduced it, meaning through the committee hearings, we finally passed it with 5 years. So we gave victims 2 more years to get support. So when victims are dealing with a circumstance, they need to make sure they're safe. They need to make sure their children are safe, and they need to make sure they have the support system to be able to walk away in a safe manner. We do know that statistically, the danger of being harmed or murdered happens after separation.
Post-separation abuse is yet another side to the dreadful domestic violence by extension, according to Tina Sweden. Speaking from her personal experiences at the EMS Media Chat, post-separation abuse can be so much to bear for targeted victims and even more dangerous statistically than domestic violence preceding the traumatic situation after separating from the abuser. Tina speaks further on her wins and how she's helping victims of domestic violence in need for help.
Post-separation abuse is more painful than the abuse inflicted during the relationship. As a survivor of both domestic violence and post-separation abuse, but I'm also here as an advocate dedicated to raising awareness on the crisis in the family court system. My case started in August of 2009. As a victim of severe financial abuse, I typed my first court declarations from a women's shelter where I had fled early one morning, afraid for my life, and I was successful in securing a restraining order which granted me exclusive use of our home. But within 24 hours of leaving the shelter and returning home, he violated the order and entered the house. And I learned that I could not depend on law enforcement or the family court system to protect me. So I started going to the courthouse as an observer whenever I had extra time. I started following cases that resembled mine. I would go to the computer at the courthouse and pull up various custody cases, reviewing each and every declaration, document, filing. I paid attention to case law that was referenced or phrases or terminologies being used by attorneys, and I really became a fixture at the courthouse. It was in 2012 I asked for and received a second child custody evaluation, same agency that had conducted the first one 2 years prior, but a different evaluator. And that evaluation is what ultimately protected my kids. That evaluator investigated and validated everything I had been saying since day one. But here's the problem. Family court is the wild, wild west. You can place the same case in front of 5 different professionals or 5 different judges, and you will have 5 different outcomes. This has to change. There is no regulation, no consistency, no oversight, no accountability, but these are children's lives, and these children are the future. It is common sense to err on the side of caution when child safety is in question, but that's not what's happening in family court. My blog, onemomsbattle.com, has become a lifeline for people all around the world. We have 250,000 community members worldwide. So I've gone on to create the resources and the support support that I wish I had during my own journey. In 2020, I founded Family Court Awareness Month, and over the past few years, we have received over 300 proclamations from cities, counties, and states across the country declaring November as Family Court Awareness Month. Post-separation abuse is an extension of domestic abuse, and the family court system becomes the abuser's playground. We are in a court system that lacks the basic training and understanding of domestic violence, and our children are being placed in grave danger. We have a crisis, and it's called Family Court. With November being Family Court Awareness Month, this is an opportune time for each of you to shine a spotlight on these issues.
An experienced and respected credible reporter of many years of publishing domestic violence-related stories is Vijay Sundaram. She is widely known for her brilliant investigative journalism works on family-related issues. At the EMS Organized Media Roundtable, Vijay made mention of a term known as coercive control, being a psychological form of domestic violence that is never physical abuse related. Here is more.
So coercive control widens the definition of domestic violence. Earlier, people thought domestic violence was when the partner beat not necessarily the wife, one partner beat up the other, and that resulted in maybe a black eye or broken bones. Coercive control can include financial abuse, emotional abuse over a period of time, and the person does not have to come with documents to show that she had been physically abused. So that's what coercive control is. California was the second state in the nation after Hawaii to introduce a coercive control law. And now there are 5 states, I believe, which have passed such similar laws, Connecticut included. I think Connecticut had its bill shortly after California did. There are 5 states in the nation which have coercive control laws, and many states are now introducing their own bills.
Now, because of its so much importance and the need for everyone to know about post-separation abuse, Tina Sweden gets back on the microphone to define the term post-separation abuse in clear terms. What is post-separation abuse?
Post-separation abuse is an extension of domestic violence, and the family court system has become the abuser's playground. This is a system that lacks basic training on domestic violence, and this should outrage everyone. It is a social justice crisis that belongs to all of us, but media is the avenue for us to raise awareness, which will lead to change. When we have women who are staying in abusive relationships because they're so afraid of the court system, we have a huge problem.
Absolutely, there is nothing comparable to peaceful coexistence, love and empathy, unity and sincere understanding in every form of relationships, from romantic to business and more related. Parties in all kinds of affairs should be sincere respecters of the values and differences of one another. Respectfully, Great Dreams Radio is calling on you to always be kind about the way we relate with ourselves. A show of sincere understanding could just be enough to resolve issues resulting to domestic violence. Be sure to play in your part always and tirelessly. Abiodun Afolabi, GDRStation Global News Plus.